Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Von Mullen, in northern Michigan and in the Upper Peninsula in particular, there are many airports that host only a couple of round-trip flights per day, often relying on the Essential Air Service program to keep those flights in circulation. I've heard directly and in very loud terms from community leaders in Houghton, Marquette, and Sault Ste. Marie about the consequences that recent reductions in regional air service have had to them economically and throughout rural Michigan. I know that Alaska Airline flies several EAS routes in Alaska, and my question for you is, based on that experience, can you speak to how critical Essential Air Service program is to maintaining the economic strength of rural communities? And given the challenges that airports served by the programs have faced since the pandemic, are there steps that you think Congress should take to strengthen that program?
Certainly, Senator Peters. Thank you for the question. We understand that essential air service and air service in general is critical to the infrastructure of where we fly. In this case, for us, EAS is in the state of Alaska, but also to rural communities in the state of Washington, Montana, Idaho, and in your case, Michigan. We're committed to the communities that we're flying to today because we understand how critical it is to support those communities. And in fact, what I would say the solution is, we're meeting here today to work across entities to solve the workforce problem that we will have in the future as the workforce ages and retires, and then we're also going to want to grow. So the solutions we bring forth today will be important to implement.
Great, thank you. Dr. Liddy, thank you for being here, and thank you for your work on the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. Your fellow board member and Michigander, Kelly Yost, told me about the work that your board did to encourage recruitment and retention of women in various aviation fields, who astonishing to me, represent fewer than 5% of airline pilots and 3% of aviation mechanical folks. And I don't think we can expect, in my mind, a strong and resilient pilot and aviation workforce without working towards better representation from women in the workforce. That's why I'm preparing to introduce Promoting Women in Aviation Act next week to codify the Women in Aviation Advisory Board. And I would like you to speak to the importance of establishing a permanent committee to continue your work to improve recruitment and retention of women in the industry, and how that will certainly benefit the flying public.
Certainly. First of all, thank you. We're excited to hear when our recommendations are in action. So, and we consider that a high priority recommendation out of our board report. And the reason for that is, we identified in the report this complex system of barriers. So there's no one quick fix. There's no one easy answer to increase those data numbers that you just discussed and presented. So in order to make sure that we continue on the path to make change and implement those recommendations, we find it necessary to call for the Permanent Advisory Committee to do so. And the focus of that committee will just make sure we get it done. Let's stay on target. Let's make sure the recommendations get implemented. But to me, I actually see some additional benefits to that board beyond just our wish to get it done, which obviously we have. But that board will bring together people from a wide variety of disciplines within aviation, if you will. So we're going to hope to have industry and nonprofits and labor and just a broad perspective brought together. And what that allows us to do is a couple of things. It also allows us to keep an eye out for additional future changes and watch what's happening in the industry so we can stay ahead and keep ahead of the workforce issues, but also the opportunity to share best practices and collaborate amongst those groups. As I said earlier, there's great work going on. It's beneficial to us to bring those groups together in order to share best practices and collaborate and make the most of it. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Mr. Monathan, we have several excellent flight schools in Michigan that are doing all they can to make sure that we have a strong aviation and pilot workforce. But one of those programs, Northwestern Michigan College, has a backlog of students waiting to matriculate through their pilot program, but they're unable to acquire additional training aircraft due to a shortage of training aircraft. My office has spoken with training aircraft manufacturers to begin to understand the supply chain difficulties and its impact on an aviation workforce. And So my question for you is, can you expand on some of the root causes of these types of manufacturing and supply chain challenges and how that's impacting our ability to train pilots because of a shortage of aircraft?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for asking the question. I can speak to the supply chain aspect of it, specifically regarding the availability of training aircraft or not. I do not have information on that.
Okay.
Specifically, if you look at aircraft manufacturing and the parts available for either to produce or to maintain the aircraft, we do have a massive challenge right now. You know, the two biggest challenges that the industry deals with is one, supply chain, and the second one is talent. And talent actually feeds into the supply chain. And this goes all the way to the sub-tiers because a larger company may be able to hire employees and because, you know, based on what the compensation requirements are as well as the brand. But if you look at the sub-tier space where they make the specific components for aircraft, even a training aircraft, for example, I think that is a challenge. You know, they are, you know, struggling to attract talent that could be impacting. But specifically the lack of availability of the aircraft, I cannot speak on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator